The war had already been lost. At least, that was what most of the galaxy believed. Across the Orion Arm, star systems burned under the iron control of the Krynn Dominion, a ruthless empire that had appeared without warning nearly 50 years earlier. Their ships were unlike anything the galactic civilizations had seen. Massive black monoliths covered in weapons that could tear apart entire fleets in minutes. One by one, the great civilizations had fallen. The ancient Vereen collective, whose technology had once been considered centuries ahead of everyone else, had been reduced to scattered refugee colonies. The proud Korthal Empire, masters of heavy warships, had lost their entire armada in the Battle of Joras Rift. Even the mysterious Elthari, beings who had guided the development of younger species for thousands of years, had retreated into hiding after losing 3 core systems. The Galactic Alliance still existed, but only barely. Its fleets were shattered. Its worlds were under siege, and its leaders were desperate. The War Council. Deep inside the orbital citadel above the world of Thalos Prime, the surviving members of the Alliance gathered around a circular chamber filled with holographic projections of the warfront. Dozens of star systems flashed red. Entire sectors had already gone dark. Admiral Saren of the Vereen stared silently at the tactical map. "We cannot hold this line," she said at last. Her voice carried the quiet certainty of someone who had spent decades fighting hopeless battles. "The Krynn advance will reach Thalos Prime in less than 3 months." A murmur spread through the chamber. 3 months. That was all the time the Alliance had left. High Commander Korthax of the Korthal Empire slammed a massive claw onto the table. "Then we strike now," he growled. "Every ship we have, one final battle." "Against what?" another council member replied bitterly. The hologram shifted, revealing the latest intelligence report. More than 600 Krynn warships had gathered in the Draven Expanse, forming the largest invasion fleet the galaxy had ever seen. And the Alliance had barely 100 ships left. The outcome was obvious. It wouldn't be a battle. It would be extinction. The forgotten member. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then a quiet voice spoke from the far end of the table. "What about humanity?" Several council members looked up in surprise. The one who had spoken was Ambassador Telara of the Elthari, her silver eyes glowing faintly. Admiral Saren frowned. "Humanity?" "Yes," Telara replied calmly. "They are still members of the Alliance." A few of the commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Humans joined the Galactic Alliance only 25 years earlier. Compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, they were considered young, primitive. Their ships were crude compared to Vereen technology, their weapons inefficient, their tactics reckless. When the war began, humanity had sent a small expeditionary fleet to help defend several frontier systems. But after suffering heavy losses in the early battles, the humans had withdrawn their forces and retreated to their own territory. Some had called it cowardice, others had called it survival. Either way, humanity had been absent from the war for nearly 2 decades. High Commander Korthax snorted. "Humans," he said dismissively. "They abandoned the war long ago." Telara's gaze remained calm. "Did they?" Admiral Saren leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Ambassador?" Telara activated another holographic display. A single message appeared. "Transmission received. Sol system." The room went silent. No one had heard from humanity in years. Slowly, the message expanded across the projection. The message.
The transmission contained only one sentence. Simple, direct, cold.
Alliance forces are advised to withdraw from the Draven Expanse immediately. Confusion rippled through the council. "That's it?" one commander asked. "No explanation?" another said. Korthax let out a low laugh. "So the humans finally speak, and they tell us to run." Talara ignored him. "There is more," she said quietly. She brought up a second piece of data, a long-range sensor scan. At first glance, it appeared empty. Then Admiral Saren noticed something. Her eyes widened. "That can't be right." "What is it?" someone asked. The Varine admiral pointed to the sensor readings. "They're wrong." Talara nodded. "Yes." The data showed an enormous distortion in space. Something massive was moving toward the Draven Expanse, but the sensors couldn't identify it. There were no engine signatures, no energy emissions, just a gravitational anomaly. "How large?" Korthax demanded. Talara hesitated. Then she answered. "Approximately 3,000 vessels." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. "That's impossible. No civilization in the galaxy has that many warships. Unless," someone finished the thought, "unless humanity built them." The Warzone. 3 weeks later, the Draven Expanse burned with the light of war. The Krynn Dominion fleet filled the void like a swarm of dark stars. 600 warships, each one capable of destroying an entire city in seconds. Their formation stretched across millions of kilometers, surrounding the last Alliance defensive line. The Alliance fleet was already in retreat. Admiral Saren watched the sensor displays aboard her flagship. Dozens of Allied ships were jumping to hyperspace, fleeing the battlefield exactly as the human transmission had instructed. Not everyone had obeyed. Several commanders refused to abandon the fight. Their ships were already under attack. Brilliant explosions lit the darkness as Krynn weapons tore through their defenses. Saren clenched her fists. "Signal all remaining Alliance ships," she ordered. "Prepare for emergency jump." Her communications officer hesitated. "Admiral, what about the humans?" Saren stared at the empty sensor display. The strange gravitational distortion was approaching rapidly, but there were still no ship signatures, no energy emissions, nothing. "They said to withdraw," she said quietly, "so we withdraw." Just as she turned away from the console, the sensors exploded with activity. The arrival. At first, it appeared as a ripple in space. Then the stars themselves seemed to bend. Across the entire Draven Expanse, reality twisted. Hundreds of massive shapes emerged from nothing. Not hyperspace, not warp, something else entirely. Ships. Thousands of them, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The human fleet had arrived. The fleet. The vessels were enormous. Each ship was shaped like a dark spearhead, kilometers long and armored with layered plating that glowed faintly with blue energy. Their hulls were covered with weapon systems so massive they resembled entire starships. But what shocked Admiral Saren the most was their formation. Perfect, absolute, 3,000 ships moving as a single entity, a fleet not designed for battle, but for annihilation. Her communications officer whispered in disbelief. "Admiral, they're broadcasting." "Put it through." A calm human voice filled the bridge. "This is Fleet Command of the United Earth Defense Armada. We have entered the Warzone." The Krynn fleet began to react. Hundreds of their ships turned toward the new threat, weapons charging. The human voice continued. "You may now withdraw." Saren stared at the display. "Withdraw?" she whispered, but the voice wasn't speaking to the Alliance. It was speaking to the enemy. The first shot. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the Krynn Dominion opened fire. 600 warships unleashed a storm of energy weapons, powerful enough to destroy planets. The void lit up like a newborn star.
Admiral Saren felt her heart sink. Even 3,000 ships couldn't survive that. But when the weapon struck the human fleet, nothing happened. The energy beams simply vanished, absorbed, deflected, erased. The human fleet didn't even slow down. Then the calm voice spoke again. Engage. And the war ended immediately.
The battle that lasted 8 minutes. For decades, the galaxy had believed the Krynn Dominion to be unstoppable. Their fleets had crushed every major civilization that dared oppose them. Their weapons could shatter continents. Their ships were armored with alloys that even the advanced technology of the Vereen Collective could barely scratch. Entire armadas had vanished trying to stop them. Now, 600 Krynn warships faced something they had never encountered before: humanity. And the humans had not come with a fleet designed to defend. They had come with a fleet designed to end wars. Shock across the battlefield. Admiral Saren watched the sensor feeds aboard her flagship, Silver Horizon. 3,000 human ships floated across the war zone in perfect formation. Each vessel radiated quiet power. But there were still almost no detectable energy signatures. That alone was terrifying. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy knew one simple rule. If you couldn't detect a ship's energy systems, you couldn't understand its technology. And if you couldn't understand its technology, you couldn't defend against it. "Admiral," her sensor officer whispered, "Krynn fleet is targeting the humans." 600 enemy warships rotated in unison. Their weapon arrays charged again. Massive beams of antimatter energy ignited the darkness. Impact in 3 seconds. Saren held her breath. The impossible defense. The second wave of Krynn weapons struck the human fleet. Thousands of beams hit simultaneously. The light was so intense it blinded half the sensors on the battlefield. For a moment, the human ships disappeared inside the explosion. Then the light faded, and the human fleet was still there. Every ship intact, every formation perfectly aligned. Not even a scratch. The Alliance bridge fell silent. "How?" someone whispered. The answer came through the human broadcast channel. "This is Fleet Command. Enemy weapon output insufficient." Admiral Saren blinked. Insufficient? The Krynn had just fired enough energy to destroy a planet, and the humans were calling it insufficient. Humanity fires back. Then the human fleet moved. 3,000 ships shifted formation with mechanical precision. Their spearhead formation opened like a blade. At the center of the formation, dozens of massive vessels moved forward. Admiral Saren's sensors struggled to identify them. "They're charging something," her officer said. "What kind of weapon?" Saren asked. The officer hesitated. "I don't know. That's not possible." But it was. The weapon signatures did not match any known system. No plasma, no antimatter, no particle beams. Instead, space itself began to distort around the human ships. Reality bent, gravity twisted, stars stretched into thin lines. Admiral Saren suddenly understood why their sensors had detected a gravitational anomaly weeks earlier. The human fleet wasn't just armed, it was manipulating physics. The first strike. The human fleet fired, but there was no beam, no missile, no visible weapon at all. Instead, space collapsed. Across the battlefield, dozens of invisible shock waves erupted from the human ships.
Where they touched Krynn vessels, the enemy ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not exploded, gone, erased from reality. Entire warships vanished in silent flashes of warped space. Admiral Saren stared at the display in horror. "Report!" Her sensor officer's voice trembled. 72 Krynn ships gone. Gone? Completely gone, Admiral. No debris. The Krynn fleet immediately attempted to scatter, but the human fleet weapons struck again. Another wave of invisible distortions ripped through enemy formations. More ships vanished. 100, then 200, then 300, and the battle had only just begun. Panic among the Krynn. For the first time in 50 years of war, the Krynn Dominion panicked. Their fleet broke formation. Hundreds of ships tried to retreat into hyperspace, but the human fleet had anticipated that. Dozens of human vessels deployed strange spherical devices across the battlefield. The moment they activated, hyperspace collapsed instantly. Jump drives across the entire sector shut down. The Krynn were trapped. The human voice returned to the broadcast channel. "You have entered Alliance territory. You will not leave." The 8-minute war. Minute 1. Another volley of human gravitational weapons fired. 50 more Krynn ships disappeared. Minute 2. The human fleet advanced. Massive railgun batteries opened fire. Metallic projectiles the size of skyscrapers accelerated to relativistic speeds. Enemy ships shattered like glass. Minute 3. Krynn battleships returned fire with their heaviest weapons. Planet-killer beams struck human ships directly. Still nothing happened. Human shields absorbed the attacks effortlessly. Minute 4. Human strike cruisers launched swarms of automated drones, thousands of them. Each drone carried antimatter charges powerful enough to destroy a cruiser. They ripped through the Krynn fleet like wolves through prey. Minute 5. The Krynn flagship attempted to broadcast a surrender signal. It never finished transmitting. A human gravity weapon erased it mid-sentence. Minute 6. Only 100 Krynn ships remained. Minute 7. 50. Minute 8. The final enemy vessel attempted one last desperate attack run. Its engines burned bright as it accelerated directly towards the human fleet. Before it reached firing range, space folded around it, and the ship vanished. Silence. 8 minutes. That was how long the battle lasted. 600 Krynn warships had entered the Draven Expanse. None of them survived. Admiral Saren stared at the empty battlefield. Thousands of human ships drifted silently through the wreckage. Not a single one had been destroyed. Her communications officer spoke quietly. "Admiral, the humans are transmitting again. Put them through." The calm voice returned. "This is Fleet Command of the United Earth Defense Armada. The Warzone has been cleared." Saren swallowed. "Cleared?" "Yes." She hesitated. "What happens now?" There was a pause. Then the human voice answered. "We proceed to the Krynn home world." The Alliance bridge went silent. Someone whispered the thought everyone was thinking. Their home world? That meant only one thing. Humanity wasn't just ending the battle. They were ending the war. A terrifying realization. As the human fleet began preparing for its next jump, Admiral Saren looked again at the sensor data. 3,000 ships, technology centuries beyond anything in the galaxy, weapons capable of erasing entire fleets in minutes, and humanity had built it all, in secret, for 20 years. She felt a chill run down her spine. The Krynn Dominion had once been the most feared power in the galaxy, but after what she had just witnessed, there was no doubt about it anymore. The most powerful civilization in the galaxy was humanity, and no one had even realized it.
The secret humanity hid for 20 years. The battlefield in the Draven Expanse had gone quiet. 600 Krynn warships, once the terror of the Orion Arm, were gone. Not destroyed, not scattered. Gone. Erased so completely that the sensors of the surviving Alliance ships could barely detect any debris at all. Thousands of human vessels floated calmly in the darkness where the enemy fleet had once stood. For the commanders of the Galactic Alliance, the silence felt unreal. Admiral Saren stood at the observation window of her flagship and watched the human fleet reposition itself with flawless coordination. They moved like a single organism. 3,000 ships shifting into new formations without hesitation, without confusion, without error. Her communications officer approached slowly. "Admiral, the humans are preparing to jump." Saren nodded. "Yes, they said they were going to the Krynn homeworld. That's several sectors away. Humans appear to have solved that problem." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, we're receiving a direct transmission." "From who?" "Human Fleet Command." Saren turned toward the communication console. "Put them through." The invitation. The holographic display flickered to life. Instead of a symbol or a fleet designation, the image showed a human. It was the first time many Alliance officers had ever seen one in person. The man looked calm. Too calm for someone who had just destroyed the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy. He wore a dark uniform with a silver insignia shaped like Earth. "Greetings," he said. "I am Admiral Jonathan Hayes, commander of the United Earth Defense Armada." Saren inclined her head respectfully. "Admiral Saren of the Vereen Collective." Hayes nodded. "You fought well in this war." Saren almost laughed. "We lost almost every battle." "Not every battle," Hayes replied. Saren frowned. "What do you mean?" The human admiral gestured toward the battlefield outside. "You survived long enough for us to arrive." That answer unsettled her. "Why now?" she asked. "Humanity withdrew from the war 20 years ago. Many believed you abandoned the Alliance." Hayes remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "We didn't abandon the war. We were preparing to finish it." The human secret. Across the Alliance ships, stunned officers listened to the conversation. "Preparing?" Saren repeated. "For 20 years?" "Yes." Hayes activated a holographic projection. A map of human-controlled space appeared. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Then new data overlays appeared. Shipyards, hundreds of them. Massive orbital construction platforms surrounding dozens of stars. Entire planets converted into manufacturing worlds. Saren stared in disbelief. This is impossible." Hayes shook his head. "No, just expensive." The map zoomed further. Gigantic shipyards surrounded the human home system of Sol, each one capable of constructing starships larger than anything the Alliance had ever built. "We realized something during the early battles of the war," Hayes said. "The Krynn Dominion was not fighting a conventional conflict. They were fighting for extermination." Saren nodded slowly. "Yes," which meant the Alliance was fighting incorrectly. "How so?" "You were fighting to survive." Hayes's eyes hardened slightly. "We decided to fight to win." The decision. 20 years earlier. When the Krynn Dominion first attacked human frontier colonies, Earth suffered devastating losses. Entire cities destroyed, millions killed. The early human fleet fought bravely beside Alliance forces, but bravery wasn't enough. Human ships were outmatched, human weapons were outdated, human fleets were losing. That was when the leadership of Earth made a controversial decision. They withdrew, not out of fear, but strategy.
Human fleets retreated back to their own territory. The rest of the galaxy believed humanity had chosen survival over loyalty. They were wrong. Hayes explained it simply. We ram the numbers. What numbers? Saren asked. The probability of victory. And 0%. The Alliance bridge went quiet. So humanity decided to change the equation. Total mobilization. Hayes's hologram shifted to show images of human industry. Entire asteroid belts mined and converted into ship components. Gas giants harvested for fusion fuel. Planets reshaped into factories. Humanity has one advantage over older civilizations, Hayes said. What advantage? We're very good at building things. For 20 years, humanity placed its entire civilization on a war footing. Not partial mobilization, total mobilization. Civilian industries converted into military production. Billions of humans working across thousands of worlds. Automated shipyards building warships 24 hours a day, every day, for 20 years. Saren whispered the obvious conclusion. You built the fleet. Hayes nodded. Yes, but 3,000 ships? Hayes interrupted. That's only the first fleet. Shock. Every Alliance officer froze. First fleet? Saren asked slowly. Yes. Hayes zoomed the map outward. Dozens of hidden shipyards appeared beyond known Alliance territory. More fleets under construction, more armadas waiting in reserve. Humanity hadn't built a fleet. They had built a war machine. Saren felt a cold realization form in her mind. How large is your navy? Hayes answered calmly. Large enough. The real upgrade. But the ships weren't the only secret humanity had developed. The hologram shifted again. Images of strange experimental technology appeared. Gravity manipulation weapons, dimensional shielding, exotic energy reactors. Saren recognized none of it. This technology, it's centuries ahead of us. Hayes nodded slightly. Yes. How? Desperation is a powerful motivator. During the 20-year preparation period, humanity pushed science further than any civilization in the galaxy. Experimental physics became practical weapons. Theoretical research became battlefield technology. Human scientists ignored the limitations older civilizations had accepted for centuries. They rewrote the rules. And the result was the fleet that had just erased 600 Krynn warships in 8 minutes. The truth about humans. Saren studied the human admiral carefully. Why tell us this? Hayes didn't hesitate. Because the war is about to end. How can you be so certain? Hayes turned his gaze toward the stars. Because the Krynn Dominion just lost their entire frontline fleet. And they don't know what we are. Saren understood. Fear. The Krynn had spent 50 years terrorizing the galaxy. Now they were about to experience that same fear. But this time, they would be the target. Preparing the final strike. Across the Draven expanse, 3,000 human ships finished forming their next jump formation. 3,000 ships aligned into massive groups. Hyperspace drives began charging, but the energy signatures were unlike anything Saren had seen before. These jump drives, they're different, she said. Hayes nodded. They're faster. How much faster? We can reach the Krynn homeworld in 6 hours. Saren nearly dropped her datapad. That distance should take weeks. Not anymore. The last question. Before the fleet jumped, Saren asked one final question. Admiral Hayes. Yes? What happens after the Krynn are defeated? Hayes paused. For the first time, his calm expression shifted slightly. After 50 years of war, he said, humanity intends to make sure it never happens again. Saren felt a shiver. That sentence could mean many things, none of them small. The departure. Across the Draven expanse, 3,000 human ships ignited their jump drives. Space began to twist, stars bent and stretched, reality folded inward. The human fleet vanished in a single synchronized jump. The Draven expanse became silent again. Admiral Saren stared at the empty stars. She had once believed the Krynn Dominion was the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Now she knew the truth. The Krynn had awakened something far worse. They had forced humanity to prepare for war. For 50 years. And now, humanity was finally ready.
6 hours after leaving the Draven expanse, the human fleet arrived at the edge of Krynn Dominion territory. For 50 years, no enemy fleet had ever reached this far. The Krynn had fought their wars far from home, crushing civilizations long before they could threaten the Dominion's core systems. But now, something impossible was happening. 3,000 human warships appeared in the darkness beyond the outer defenses of the Krynn Empire, and the Dominion had no idea how to stop them. The Krynn Home System. The Krynn homeworld, Krynn Tor, orbited a massive red star in the center of a heavily fortified system. Orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet like a steel cage. Thousands of automated weapon stations floated in precise formations. Massive fortress stations guarded the approach lanes. And deep within the system waited the Dominion Reserve Fleet, nearly 1,000 warships. These ships had never left Krynn space. They were the last line of defense for the Empire. For centuries, they had never been needed, until now. When the first human vessels appeared on long-range sensors, alarms echoed across every command center in the system. Krynn commanders stared in disbelief at the sensor reports. 3,000 ships, approaching in perfect formation and moving faster than any fleet they had ever seen. Panic in the Dominion command. Inside the central command citadel orbiting Krynn Tor, Supreme Commander Vraxel studied the tactical display. The human icons glowed bright against the holographic star map, 3,000 of them. His subordinate officers spoke in anxious tones. They destroyed the invasion fleet in the Draven expanse. In 8 minutes. That is impossible. Vraxel's claws tightened around the console. No fleet can destroy 600 Dominion warships in 8 minutes. One of the officers answered quietly. But they did. Another officer stepped forward. Supreme Commander, the humans are requesting communication. Vraxel hesitated. Then he nodded. Put them through. The message to the Dominion. Admiral Jonathan Hayes appeared on the holographic display. Behind him, the command deck of the human flagship glowed with quiet blue light. Vraxel studied the human carefully. This creature looked fragile, small, soft, nothing like the armored warriors of the Krynn species. And yet this small creature commanded the fleet that had just destroyed half the Dominion Navy. Hayes spoke calmly. This is Admiral Hayes of the United Earth Defense Armada. You have entered a war of extermination against the civilizations of this region. You have destroyed hundreds of worlds. You have killed billions. Vraxel hissed in anger. This galaxy belongs to the Dominion. Hayes' expression didn't change. Not anymore. Vraxel leaned forward. You believe your fleet can defeat the Dominion in its own system? Hayes answered without hesitation. Yes. The Krynn command chamber erupted in furious voices. Vraxel slammed his claw down again. Then come, he growled. Your fleet will die here. Hayes shook his head slowly. No. Then he said something that confused everyone in the chamber. You misunderstand. We didn't come to fight. The human formation. Outside the system, the human fleet suddenly slowed. 3,000 ships shifted formation.
Instead of advancing toward the Krynn defenses, they spread outward into a massive circular pattern around the star system. From the perspective of the Dominion sensors, it looked like the humans were surrounding the entire system. "What are they doing?" one officer asked. Vraxel stared at the tactical map. "They are positioning something." The unknown weapon. Across the human fleet, hundreds of massive vessels began activating systems that had never been used in battle before. Gigantic structures extended from the hulls of the largest ships. Ring-shaped devices unfolded into space. Energy began to gather between them. Admiral Hayes watched the progress calmly. "Charge status?" he asked. 70%, a human officer replied. Across the fleet, the strange devices began glowing brighter. Blue light spread across the vacuum of space. Gravitational waves rippled through the surrounding region. Sensors across the Krynn system suddenly began malfunctioning. "What is happening?" Vraxel demanded. An officer shouted in alarm. "Gravitational fluctuations detected across the entire system." "How large?" "System-wide." Vraxel's eyes widened. "That's impossible. No weapon in the galaxy could affect an entire star system at once. But the human fleet wasn't using a normal weapon. They were using something far worse. The project humanity built. 20 years earlier, when humanity realized the Krynn Dominion could not be defeated through conventional warfare, they had begun developing something radical, a weapon that would end wars permanently. The project had been given a simple name: Project Silence. Instead of destroying enemy ships one at a time, the weapon targeted something much larger: space itself. The idea was terrifying. If gravity could be manipulated on a massive enough scale, a star system could be isolated from the rest of the universe, trapped, cut off from hyperspace, cut off from interstellar travel, cut off from escape. Human scientists had spent 20 years solving the impossible physics required to make it work. Now, the weapon was ready, and the Krynn Dominion was about to see it for the first time. The activation. Back in the Dominion command citadel, alarms screamed across every console. Hyperspace instability detected. Jump drives are failing. Gravitational fields increasing. Vraxel roared in frustration. "Explain." One of the scientists stared at the data in horror. "They're bending space-time across the entire system. That can't be done." The human fleet's devices glowed brighter. A massive web of gravitational energy spread across the system. It connected every point in space like an invisible net. Admiral Hayes spoke calmly. "Begin final phase." The silence. For a brief moment, the entire star system became perfectly still. Then, every hyperspace corridor collapsed. Every jump drive shut off instantly. The space around Krynn Tor twisted into a sealed gravitational shell. No ship could escape. No signal could leave. The entire Krynn system had just been isolated from the galaxy forever. The human voice returned to the Dominion communication channel. "This system has been quarantined. Your empire can no longer expand. You can no longer invade other civilizations. You can no longer threaten the galaxy." Vraxel stared at the screen in shock. "You imprisoned us?" Hayes nodded calmly. "Yes." A different kind of victory. The Krynn fleet remained intact. Their planet still existed. Their cities were unharmed, but they were trapped inside their own system. No hyperspace travel, no escape, no war. For the first time in their history, the Dominion had been completely neutralized without a single shot fired. The Krynn Empire had been defeated, not through destruction, but through isolation. Fear across the galaxy.
Far away in Alliance territory, the news spread quickly. Humanity had ended the war. They had done what no other civilization could accomplish. They had stopped the Krynn Dominion permanently, and they had done it with a weapon capable of sealing an entire star system. For many civilizations, the realization was terrifying, because if humanity could trap the Krynn, they could trap anyone. The human fleet turns home. With the quarantine field fully active, the human fleet began powering down the massive devices. The mission was complete. Admiral Hayes issued the final order. Fleet, prepare for return to Earth. 3,000 warships turned away from the trapped Krynn system. Within minutes, the Armada jumped into hyperspace, leaving the silent star system behind. But across the galaxy, one question remained. What would humanity do next? Because now, everyone knew the truth. The most powerful civilization in the galaxy was no longer the Krynn Dominion. It was humanity.
The day humanity became the guardian of the galaxy. The war was over, but the galaxy had never felt more uncertain. Across hundreds of star systems, billions of beings watched the news broadcasts, replaying the same unbelievable event. The Krynn Dominion, the empire that had terrorized the Orion Arm for 50 years, had been defeated in a single day. Not destroyed, not conquered, trapped. An entire civilization locked inside its own star system by a weapon no one else could even comprehend. And the ones who had done it were the youngest members of the Galactic Alliance. Humanity. The silence after war. When the human fleet returned from Krynn space, the galaxy was waiting. Dozens of Alliance fleets gathered near the world of Thalos Prime, the political center of the surviving civilizations. Ships from every species filled the surrounding sectors: Varine cruisers, Korthal dreadnoughts, Elthari diplomatic vessels. All of them had come for the same reason: to meet humanity, and to understand what had just happened. Because no one truly knew what humanity planned to do next. For decades, the galaxy had feared the Krynn Dominion. Now a new fear had begun to grow. What if the humans decided to become the next empire? After all, they now possessed technology far beyond any other civilization, a navy larger than any fleet ever built, and a weapon capable of imprisoning entire star systems. If humanity chose conquest, no one could stop them. The arrival of Earth's fleet. 3 days later, hyperspace rippled across the Thalos system. Then the human fleet appeared. Thousands of warships emerged in perfect formation. The massive spear-shaped vessels moved with quiet precision, surrounding the outer region of the system. Their presence alone changed the atmosphere. The Alliance fleets that had once dominated this space suddenly looked small by comparison. Admiral Saren watched the arrival from the bridge of the Silver Horizon. Even after everything she had seen, the sight still amazed her. 3,000 ships, each one powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. And according to Admiral Hayes, this wasn't even humanity's full navy. "Admiral," her communications officer said quietly, "the humans are requesting a council meeting." Saren nodded. "It's time." The Galactic Council convenes. For the first time since the war began, the leaders of the Galactic Alliance gathered again inside the Great Council chamber of Thalos Prime. But this meeting felt very different from the ones before. Before, they had gathered to discuss survival. Now they gathered to discuss the future of the galaxy. And one seat at the circular table had been reserved for a new representative: humanity. When Admiral Jonathan Hayes entered the chamber, every leader turned to look at him. He walked calmly to his seat. No guards, no weapons, just a single human,
representing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. High Commander Korthax of the Korthal Empire spoke first. His deep voice echoed through the chamber. "The Krynn Dominion is contained?" Hayes nodded. "Yes." "Completely?" "Completely. The system is permanently isolated. Their ships cannot leave. Their signals cannot escape. Their empire is over." Murmurs spread around the chamber. The war that had lasted 50 years had ended with a single decision. The question everyone feared. Finally, Ambassador Talara of the Althari spoke. Her glowing silver eyes studied the human carefully. "Admiral Hayes, humanity now possesses the largest fleet in the galaxy." Hayes remained silent. Talara continued, "You also possess technology centuries beyond our own." The chamber grew quiet. Then she asked the question everyone had been thinking. What does humanity intend to do with this power? The room held its breath, because the answer to that question would determine the fate of every civilization present. Humanity's answer. Admiral Hayes stood slowly. For a moment he looked around the chamber. He saw the fear in their eyes, and he understood it, because 20 years earlier humanity had been afraid too, afraid of the Krynn, afraid of extinction, afraid of losing everything. So humanity prepared harder than any civilization ever had before. Now that preparation had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Hayes spoke calmly. "Humanity does not want an empire." Several leaders exchanged surprised looks. Hayes continued, "We spent 20 years preparing for war because we believed the Krynn Dominion would destroy us. But that war is now over, so our goal is simple." He paused, then finished the sentence. "We will make sure it never happens again." The Guardian Fleet. The holographic star map appeared above the Galactic Council table. Human-controlled space glowed in blue, but new markers began appearing across the galaxy. Human defense stations, observation outposts, patrol routes. Hayes explained the plan. "The United Earth Defense Armada will remain active. Our fleets will patrol the borders of known space. We will monitor for emerging threats. We will intervene if another empire attempts to conquer the galaxy." The council members stared at the map. Human fleets positioned across dozens of sectors, not occupying territory, but protecting it. High Commander Korthax frowned. "You are offering to become guardians?" Hayes nodded. "Yes." The chamber fell silent again, because the truth was obvious. Humanity was now powerful enough to enforce peace across the entire galaxy. The fate of the Krynn. One final issue remained. Admiral Saren spoke quietly. "What about the Krynn Dominion?" Hayes answered immediately. "They will remain inside their system." "For how long?" someone asked. Hayes looked toward the stars outside the chamber window. "As long as necessary." The message was clear. The Krynn had chosen a war of extermination. Humanity had chosen a different punishment: eternal isolation. Their empire gone, their fleets trapped, their future limited to a single star system, a prison built from the fabric of space itself. The human truth. Before the council ended, Ambassador Talara asked a final question. "Admiral Hayes, humanity helped us. You could have stayed hidden. You could have waited until the Krynn destroyed the rest of the galaxy and then claimed it for yourselves." Hayes smiled slightly. "Because humans are stubborn." The chamber waited for him to explain. "Once we joined the Alliance, we considered the other civilizations part of our neighborhood, and humans protect their neighborhood." It was such a simple answer, but somehow it made perfect sense. A new era.
Months later, the galaxy slowly began to recover. Destroyed worlds were rebuilt, trade routes reopened, refugees returned home. And across the stars, human patrol fleets moved silently through space, watching, protecting, preventing another war before it could begin. The United Earth Defense Armada became known by a new name among the older civilizations, the Guardian Fleet. Not rulers, not conquerors, but protectors. The final realization. Admiral Saren stood once more at the observation window of her flagship months later. Far in the distance, a group of human warships passed through the system on patrol. Their massive hulls glowed faintly with blue light as they jumped into hyperspace. She remembered the first time she had seen them appear in the Draven expanse. 3,000 ships emerging from nowhere, ending a war in 8 minutes. At the time, she had thought humanity was terrifying. Now she understood something else. Humanity did not build their fleet to rule the galaxy. They built it because they refused to let anyone destroy it. And that stubborn determination had saved every civilization in the Orion Arm. The Krynn Dominion once believed humanity was weak, young, insignificant. That mistake ended their empire, because the most dangerous species in the galaxy was the one that fought hardest when everything it loved was threatened. And that species was humanity.